I invite the member for Vancouver West End to lead the House in prayer or reflection.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. To paraphrase a favorite leader of mine, Martin Luther King Jr., I'll say that again. Only light can drive out darkness, and only love can drive out hate. And so I ask us all to approach this work with love and understanding and the best in all of us to bring out the best in each other. Thank you, Honourable Speaker.
Introductions by members. Member for Saanich North and Islands.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I'd like to introduce Beatrice Sharp. Beatrice is a grade 11 student from St. Michael's University School. She's passionate about the environment and politics. She's a volunteer with Youth to Sea and the City of Victoria Youth Council, working on projects such as painting to raise awareness for ocean pollution and raising money for rest homes and homelessness. She's competed internationally in public speaking and came third. She's currently planning a sustainability conference for high school students in the Greater Victoria area. Will the House please join me in welcoming Beatrice and making her feel very welcome here.
Member for Vernon Monashee.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Today I have two introductions to make. First one is introduction of Dr. Leslie Cormack. She's Principal and Deputy Vice Chancellor at the UBC's Okanagan campus in Kelowna, BC. Professor Cormack joined UBC in 2020 from the University of Alberta, where she served as Dean of the Faculty of Arts from 2010 till 2020. Previously, Professor Cormack was Dean of the Arts and Social Science at Simon Fraser University from 2007 to 2010. Earlier taught at the University of Alberta in Department of History and Classics for 17 years. We're very lucky to have her at the UBCO, and I'm thrilled to welcome Dr. Cormack here at the precinct. I was under the impression she was going to be in the gallery, but I'll be meeting with her later. Please join me to welcome and thank Dr. Cormack for everything she does. Thank you. And my second introduction, Mr. Speaker, is today one of my incredible constituency advocate, Lisa Feniedi. She's celebrating her second employment anniversary. I just want to give her a shout out for all she's done over the last couple of years to go above and beyond to serve people of Vernon Monashee and beyond, along with Caitlin and Charlene. So with the House, please join me to thank Lisa for everything she does and my entire team. Thank them. Thank you.
Madam Clerk. Sorry, there's another introduction. Member for North Coast.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Soon you'll be saying member from North Coast Haida Gwaii with our name change. And in reflection of my constituency of North Coast Haida Gwaii. I wanted to just make an introduction because it's very difficult for people from Haida Gwaii to get here. I did want to just acknowledge them because there are many eyes glued to the television today watching the riveting events in this chamber with an introduction of a bill that will greatly impact their lives for the positive. It has a lot of history that goes back to the 1980s, and it's extremely significant to the people of Haida Gwaii, so I wanted to acknowledge them because I know they're all watching. They have been so patient, but we're finally here. So hello and hawa to my friends in Haida Gwaii.
Madam Clerk.
Introduction of bills.
Minister of Forests.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have the honor to present a message from Her Honor, the Lieutenant Governor.
Her Honor, the Lieutenant Governor transmits here with Bill number 8, entitled Athlee Gwaii Legacy Trust Winding Up Act, and recommends the same to the Legislative Assembly. Minister.
I move that the bill be introduced and read a first time now. I'm pleased to introduce Bill 8, the Athlee Gwaii Legacy Trust Winding Up Act. This bill gives the trustees of the Athlee Gwaii Legacy Trust the power to wind up said trust by transferring that trust property to their corporate trustee, the Gwaii Trust Society. By permitting this transfer, the trust property can be used to fund a broader scope of initiatives on Haida Gwaii, including renewable energy, environmental restoration, and economic development. Broadening the scope of eligible projects will support job creation on Haida Gwaii to the benefit of the nearly 5,000 residents of the archipelago. I invite my colleagues to join me in supporting this bill.
Members, the question is first reading of the bill. All those in favor indicate aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Minister.
Honourable Speaker, I move that the bill be placed on the orders of the day for second reading at the next sitting of the House after today.
You have heard the question. All those in favor indicate aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. House Leader of the Third Party.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I move that a bill entitled the North Island Development Initiative Trust Amendment Act 2024, of which notice has been given in my name on the order paper, be introduced and read a first time now. Last fall, the Island Coastal Economic Trust requested that gendered language in their act be removed and replaced with neutral language. However, when the minister tabled their amendments in Bill 42, the miscellaneous statutes amendments, to increase the investment cap of the trust, they failed to bring forward these changes in any of the acts for investment trusts in the province. During debate, I drafted an amendment on the fly to change one instance of gendered language, and the amendment passed. The effort was to raise the question why the seemingly innocuous request was not in the amendments that were tabled, and it ended up being an unfortunate oversight. The Minister of Jobs, Economic Development and Innovation indicated a willingness to make the needed amendments, ensuring more neutral language and inclusivity. During the debate, I was encouraged to table amendments correcting other instances, however, did not have the drafting capacity at the time. The Minister committed to making additional corrections to engender greater neutrality during this spring 2024 legislative session, and I'm tabling this bill now to ensure that there's an opportunity to follow through on that commitment should the amending legislation not be introduced. This private member's bill offers an opportunity to continue the work that we started last fall. It follows the requests of our friends at the Island Coastal Economic Trust by removing all gendered language from the North Island Coast Development Initiative Act. The government has been making such changes in other laws, and I hope the minister sees fit to debate this bill so together we can finish the work we started last fall and ensure the act is guiding the ICT is more inclusive.
Members, the question is first reading of the bill. All those in favor indicate aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Member.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be placed on the orders of the day for second reading at the next sitting of the House after today.
You have heard the question. All those in favor indicate aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Madam Clerk.
Statements by members.
Member for West Vancouver Capilano.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm actually a bit nervous this morning. I'd written something yesterday that I wanted to talk about today, and read through it again, and I just thought this just doesn't quite do it for what I want to talk about today. But I'm going to start by what I had originally written, and we'll go from there. So, Mr. Speaker, a world free of bias, stereotypes, and discrimination. A world that's diverse, equitable, and inclusive. That's what we're supposed to be talking about and aspiring to on March 8th, International Women's Day. And then I started to read some of the other things here. Poignant reminder of the ongoing pursuit of gender equity. This day acknowledges the achievements of women while highlighting the challenges they still face. We often get in here and we Google and we look up, what is this particular day that we're supposed to be talking about? What is this day that we're supposed to be celebrating? And we end up in here talking about inclusivity and equitable societies and principled stands. But we don't always know what those mean, and we don't always talk about that personal part of ourselves. So I was thinking maybe I would talk about women in politics, so I started looking up women in politics, and there's a lot of interesting stories in terms of how Kim Campbell, had sexist comments, and she was characterized as unstable and unreliable because she was twice divorced. Now, if we use that judgment for male politicians, it wouldn't quite, there'd be a lot of conversation. Or Jacinda Ardern from New Zealand, there was criticism of how can a prime minister have a baby while they're in office? That doesn't make any sense. But men, many of you, men in this room have become fathers while we've been here in the House. And so I don't hear anybody reporting on that or tweeting out about that, and we've really got to think about how we need to stand behind women. I didn't even start yet, and it's over. Well, thank you very much, and have a good and real Women's International Women's Day.
Member for Burnaby North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. According to the Surgeon General of the United States, we are living through a pandemic of loneliness and isolation. He called it as serious a health risk as smoking 17 cigarettes a day. Loneliness is not only bad for our health, it's bad for our communities, because lonely people are less likely to engage in community activities. After COVID, many of us may have lost the habit of smiling at a stranger, having a brief chat on the bus or in the line at the grocery store. When we don't connect with strangers, we reduce our chance to feel useful and needed and to form tighter bonds. Feeling disconnected from others can lead to fear and suspicion and to behavior that deepens our isolation. The Vancouver Foundation has found that people who live densely in high-rises are the loneliest. There are factors unique to high-rises that can worsen isolation. Newer high-rises confine you to your own floor. The culture of some high-rises discourage residents from greeting each other on the elevator, and there might even be a rule against posting a notice that invites neighbors to go for walks together. But urban loneliness is not inevitable. Many cities are ensuring that the design of future high-rises promote social interaction. And even today, some high-rise residents are being proactive. I know of one high-rise in Burnaby North where a resident created a Facebook page. 500 of his neighbours have joined. In another, the Strata Council includes the position of Recreation Director. Others have community gardens, buying clubs, libraries where residents can trade books, workshops where they can teach each other skills. It is an inevitable necessity that our cities will become denser and more vertical. But if we are proactive, high-rises can become neighbourhoods where the most important supply in our emergency kit can be each other. Thank you.
Member for Vancouver Langara.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to pay tribute to Dr. Gurdev Singh Gill, who passed away on December 17, 2023 at the age of 92 in Chandigarh, Punjab, India. He immigrated to Canada when he was 18 in 1947 and worked in a mill in Duncan. Dr. Gill was the first Canadian of Indian origin to practice medicine in Canada in 1956 and the first graduate from the UBC School of Medicine. Dr. Gill had a medical practice in New Westminster for 40 years. His medical office was known as a community hall where Indo-Canadians came from across Metro Vancouver to seek his guidance on how to better integrate into Canadian society. He gave 70 years of his life to community leadership, including serving as the president of the Vancouver Khalsa Diwan Society, the oldest Sikh organization in Canada dating back to 1906. He served as the president of the original Sikh Gurdwara on West 2nd Avenue in Vancouver, originally built in 1908. Dr. Gill played a major leadership role in the building of the Ross Street Gurdwara, serving as the first president in 1970 when it opened, and also played a major role in establishing the number 5 Road Temple in Richmond, the Gurdwara Nanak Niwas. In the 1960s, he co-founded the East Indian Canadian Citizens Welfare Association to advocate for a fairer immigration policy, including for family reunification. As the president of the Indo-Canadian Friendship Society, which he founded in 1974, he supported many improvement projects for 27 villages in the Punjab to provide better access to drinking water, wastewater treatment plants, sewage disposal systems, roads, solar street lighting, as well as computers in schools. In 1990, Dr. Gill was the first Canadian of Indian origin to be honored with the Order of BC in its inaugural year here in this legislature. Dr. Gill's life of leadership and service is an example to all of us, and we express our gratitude for his legacy of community building. He will always be remembered for being such a beacon of hope and leadership for our province.
Thank you. Member for Vancouver Kensington.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. There's an unmarked grave at the Mountain View Cemetery in Vancouver, Kensington, the district I've represented since 2009 as an MLA. Therein lies Benjamin Flores, or simply Benson Flores. Benson Flores lived on Bowen Island, and he died without family on April 11, 1929. No one had probably visited his burial place until about a century afterwards, when community historian Joseph Lopez stood by his unmarked grave in 2021. Through his research, Joseph Lopez established that Benson Flores was likely the earliest Filipino on record to have immigrated and lived in Canada. He was an early settler of Bowen Island, and while there were a number of seafarers from the Philippines among the diverse crews of European and American vessels trading in the Pacific Northwest since the 16th century, intermarrying with coastal First Nations tribes, Benson Flores is the first one documented on the census. He's on the 1911 census. There is a GoFundMe campaign led by Ted Alquidas, the editor and publisher of PhilippineCanadianNews.com, who is producing a documentary film on Benson Flores, and also fundraising to raise money for a memorial tombstone to be placed on his grave on the occasion of his birthday next month. So I'll be supporting the GoFundMe page. I'll ask all MLAs here and the community right across British Columbia to join in this effort for supporting the documentary film and to raise money for a tombstone to mark his place. The GoFundMe page is called Benson Flores, First Filipino in Canada. I want to thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and everyone in the legislature for your support. Thank you.
Leader of Third Party.
Oh, thank you, Honourable Speaker. To commemorate International Women's Day, I'm keen to talk about a topic that just doesn't seem to get enough attention in here. Menopause. Now, I really can't understand why we don't talk about all the exciting changes we go through as a result of the fluctuating levels of estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. Yes, testosterone through perimenopause and menopause. Hot flushes, night sweats, weight gain, mood swings, weakened muscles. It's a freight train of new and wonderful experiences all showing up in our 40s and 50s, just when our careers, our children, our relationships, and our aging parents all come together into a giant and teetering Jenga tower of demands on us. I look back at the last 10 years and I really deeply wish that I'd been more prepared for perimenopause. Instead, it's been like the worst toy of all, a jack-in-the-box, constantly springing out without warning with new and sometimes way too exciting developments. Women's health is woefully understudied. And yes, we get a month for men's health in this building. Let's remember that. And women's reproductive health is only just starting to get the attention it needs. Our uteruses, in which entire human beings grow, have been accused of wandering around our bodies, causing all manner of ailments. We've come a long way from Dr. David Rubin's 1969 take on menopause, when he wrote that women, quote, having outlived their ovaries, may have outlived their usefulness as human beings. But we still have a long ways to go. And to get to where we need to be, women's health needs to be a priority. It's time to restore the provincial women's health strategy and update the provincial health officers on women's health and well-being. I've even written a little poem about it. To doctors, you're a mystery. It's been that way through history. It's in her head, insisted he. Try not to pout.
Member for Vernon-Monashee.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Recently, on a warm, sunny Saturday morning in February, I had the privilege and honor to participate in the 64th Annual Winter Carnival Parade with a very special guest, our Premier. It was such a joy to show our Premier and his staff this incredible carnival that celebrates community spirit and connection. This was a milestone visit, as Premier was the first Premier to join our community's beloved Winter Carnival and festivities in 50 years. Our Premier was able to connect with so many locals along the parade route and were at various events during the visit, including the Balloon Glow and Breakfast event. Vernon Winter Carnival, the largest of its kind in Western Canada, hosted 138 events across the Greater Vernon area and brought so much light to our communities during the darkest season. Behind the curtains of this magical event stands dedicated Vernon Winter Carnival Society, a nonprofit organization run by Executive Director Chris Fuller and Board of Directors, including my constituency assistant Lisa Fagnetti. Each year they host hundreds of events over a 10-day period at the beginning of February, and every year with new theme. This year's theme was games. Coming together as a community is more important than ever. And the Vernon Winter Carnival has been a beacon of light in these times, allowing people of Vernon-Monashee to put aside their differences and come together in celebration. I want to take the time to thank the hundreds of hardworking volunteers. Without their countless hours of planning, dedication, and tireless efforts, this wouldn't have been possible. To all the businesses and individuals and who organized hosted events, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. And to the Premier and his team, thank you so much for joining us and exploring what our community has to offer. I would like to ask all members of this House to please join me to thank these amazing volunteers for all the efforts they put in to enrich the lives of their friends and neighbors during these wonderful 10 days of Carnival. Thank you.
Madam Clerk.
Oral questions by members.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, yesterday, British Columbians heard the former finance minister confirm that there is systemic anti-Semitism in this NDP government and caucus. Her words were clear, and I quote, "Anti-Semitism is the double standard that we have consistently shown," end of quote. The former finance minister provided multiple examples of anti-Semitism within the NDP cabinet, caucus, and the NDP party. Now, we've seen in the past when there were accusations of systemic racism against Indigenous people in the healthcare system that this government immediately ordered a full independent inquiry. Given that these are very serious accusations of systemic anti-Semitism in the NDP cabinet and caucus by a former finance minister, will the Premier today commit to calling a full and independent inquiry into these very serious allegations?
Premier.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. It's a sad day for our caucus. The member for Coquitlam-Millardville, such a critical voice in our caucus. Her unique experiences as a Jewish woman in politics, the fact that she had relatives in Israel, called up to serve in war, that through her connections, through family and friends, she knew people had been killed, kidnapped. It brought to our team a vital voice representing a key community in our province that's feeling under threat right now. They're feeling under attack. And I think the key for me as a leader is to ask myself, what could we have done to make sure that her voice stayed in our caucus? I had a meeting with Selena just a few hours before she resigned with the member for Coquitlam-Millardville, my apologies. Just a few hours before she left our caucus, and she didn't raise these issues with me. She didn't feel safe to do that. And so for me, it's a chance to think about, why is that the case? How do I make sure that my caucus colleagues feel safe? Now, it doesn't take away I disagree with some of her characterizations of what happened, and I think we could have worked through them had we had the opportunity. And I'm going to take that opportunity, Honourable Speaker, and I'm going to continue the work that I'm doing, that our government's doing to fight hate, to fight anti-Semitism in our province. I'm meeting with Rabbinical Council tomorrow, leadership from CJA, the Federation, to make sure that we're supporting the Jewish community going forward and fighting anti-Semitism, something this House has been united on, remains united on, and is in the heart of every single member of our caucus.
Leader of the Official Opposition, supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, the problem is that the member from Coquitlam-Millardville made it very clear that the ongoing empty words are never enough. It actually requires action from this Premier. And frankly, British Columbians are more likely to believe a Premier who stands on principle as opposed to a Premier who is effectively just trying to do damage control. The former finance minister says, and I quote, almost 300 Jewish physicians signed a letter calling on UBC Medical School to address anti-Semitism on campus. Ted Rosenberg, a prominent physician, quit, citing a toxic work environment and anti-Semitism. I heard nothing from any of you, not the Minister of Health, not the Premier, no one. End of quote. What the longtime senior member and former finance minister of this NDP government has confirmed is that there is systemic anti-Semitism that requires more than just the empty words that we just heard from this Premier. So again, to the Premier, not empty words, but will the Premier launch an independent investigation to root out the systemic anti-Semitism that has been confirmed to exist in his government and his caucus? Will he do that?
Premier.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I agree with the member that actions are needed to support the Jewish community. And we've taken those early actions. We're ensuring mandatory Holocaust education for all British Columbia kids at school. The BC Prosecution Service has a new hate crimes protocol. But this is just the start of the work we need to do. That's why I'm meeting with the community to identify further steps that we can take. The member rightly raises with concern the issue of UBC's medical school. The member for Coquitlam-Millardville was the minister responsible for post-secondary and future skills at the time. She reached out to UBC, to the President's office, expressed the concern that everybody, I think in this House, but certainly in our caucus, felt about those allegations being brought forward from a prominent instructor at the medical school, the anti-Semitism that he felt. She received commitments from UBC about what they were going to do. I'm happy to bring back to this House an update on where they're at on that work. Action is absolutely needed to ensure that the community feels safe, and that's the commitment of everybody on this side of this House, and I believe everybody in this House.
Leader of the Official Opposition, second supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, but let's be really clear here. We are talking about an individual who up until 24 hours ago was a member of this government and was a former senior cabinet minister as part of this government for the entire term that they've been in power. And the systemic anti-Semitism that she discusses exists within this NDP cabinet and caucus, and sadly appears to have spread, that culture of anti-Semitism appears to have spread indeed into the public service. One whistleblower says, and I quote, "I was asked not to wear my Star of David necklace in a visible way in my team meetings because it is a symbol of genocide. It is not. It is a sign of my identity. My manager is the one who told me this, so there is no point complaining. I need to find work outside of the public service." End of quote. That, Premier, is systemic anti-Semitism. And so my question to the Premier was a very straightforward and simple one. I'm not looking for words. I'm not looking for meetings that you're about to have. I am asking you very succinctly. You did the right thing when you found out that there was systemic discrimination against Indigenous peoples in the healthcare system. You ordered a full independent inquiry. We now have numerous examples of anti-Semitism within your own cabinet and caucus and party. Will you do the right thing? Call for an independent inquiry today and give the public the confidence that you actually are doing something to ensure that you root out this systemic anti-Semitism in your own government.
All questions through the chair, please. Premier.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I'm profoundly concerned about the set of facts the members brought forward. I encourage him to encourage this person to bring forward their complaint. That's not systemic anti-Semitism. That's anti-Semitism. Full stop. And it is not acceptable in the public service. It is not acceptable in government. And we have to fight hate every day. There are two communities that are hurting very badly in our province right now. The Jewish community is frightened. We're seeing a rise in anti-Semitism broadly. They need an ally in government to support them with these things. That's the commitment that every member of our caucus makes to that community, and that is the work that we're going to continue to do with them. The Muslim community is seeing rising Islamophobia. We have a number of members of the public service, the Muslim faith, that feel angst, concern, fear about discrimination and racism as well. We've got to support those members of the public service too. As a province, our strength is in working together. As a province, our strength is in being an anti-racist province that fights discrimination every day so that everybody is welcome here. That commitment remains. It is a priority for every member of my caucus, and I am sure for every member of the other party's caucus as well. British Columbians expect that from us, and we will deliver for them.
Member for Vancouver-Langara.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I really would urge the Premier to take a step back and reflect on his answers to the Leader of Official Opposition, just like he reflected this morning on his statement that he put out to blame the member from Coquitlam-Larville and say it's her issue, her mistake. She was the single ally for the Jewish community in the fight against anti-Semitism in this government, in this Executive Council. Clearly, she was left to feel very alone in this caucus. And she's departed, and she's spoken very clearly in her letter. The former finance minister has said very clearly, quote, "As a government, we have not been standing up to anti-Semitism," end quote. The Premier needs to reflect on that, and I know he knows. As we've raised in question period, in April of 2023, as I raised in estimates with the Attorney General here. The Premier, when he was Attorney General, gave a specific direction to refuse to adopt into law the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism. There is no specific action that the Attorney General could point to in my questioning of her before the former Finance Minister's announcement of her departure from this government caucus. There's no specific action that's been taken to implement the IHRA definition in this province. The systemic anti-Semitism that we're talking about is pervasive. Clearly, in the way that the former Finance Minister describes in her letter, it sets it out very clearly. Her concerns with individual members of this government caucus.
Question, member.
And it starts from the top. This Premier cannot continue to shirk his responsibility. The former Finance Minister reveals that public service officials have made anti-Semitic statements at the beginning of meetings, resulting in discomfort and fear, and that there has been no acknowledgement and no action in response to these concerns being raised.
Member has a question.
Will the Premier immediately reflect on where his government and his caucus is right now and call for an independent investigation into the systemic racism that pervades through his caucus and his government?
Premier.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. I worry that maybe I wasn't clear enough. I was really heartbroken to lose the member for Coquitlam-Millardville as a caucus member. I sat down with her just hours before she issued this letter, specifically because I knew she was hurting. And it was incredibly hard for her to give up her cabinet position, to have to do the meetings and the work with the community. I know that was so hard for her. And obviously, I didn't create the space where she was able to bring these concerns forward to me. That's not her fault. That's my responsibility to create that space for her to bring that forward. And so I'll reflect on what I need to do to make sure that that happens. And I'll make sure that what I know is the shared commitment of everybody in this place to fight anti-Semitism, that work continues from our early actions around mandatory Holocaust education, around the prosecution service direction about their policy, and to build on that, and to take direction and work in partnership with the community, starting with the long scheduled meeting I've had with the rabbis tomorrow, as well as with leading Jewish advocacy groups. The community is hurting. They need their support. Celine is the member for Coquitlam-Millardville is a key part of that community. She needs our support. Even if I disagree with the characterization of some of the things that she said, she deserved the opportunity to address those issues in our caucus, and I needed to create that space for her.
Vancouver Langara, supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this is a very important discussion because that space clearly was not created. She had to take the step to resign from this caucus, to speak independently. There is no space. She was being so much mistreated and shunned by this leader and her caucus members. Silence is not the solution here. This is a failure completely in the Premier's leadership of his government in this caucus. This is the reason why he needs to take a step back. He needs to reflect on the fact that there is a need for an independent investigation. If he wants to restore any semblance of trust and confidence in his government, he needs to do so. As the opposition, we've heard from whistleblowers stating that the Public Service Agency has authorized and sanctioned Zoom backgrounds containing the phrase, "from the river to the sea." As we all know, this reference, as we all ought to know, this reference is an explicit call to wipe Israel off the map and murder all Jews by driving them into the sea. It is blatantly anti-Semitic, and yet it was sanctioned by this government and this Premier. This is exactly the sort of anti-Semitism that the IHRA definition is meant to prevent. So again, through you, Mr. Speaker, I call on the Premier to confirm that he will now adopt the IRA definition into law and take immediate action to implement that definition. And secondly, that he will call for an investigation into the systemic racism in his government and caucus.
Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to start by adding to the Premier's comments earlier about how saddened we all are that the MLA for Coquitlam-Millardville made the decision yesterday to resign. I think we all hear the pain and the hurt in her voice as a Jewish woman, although we may disagree with the characterization of some of the things that she said. I have deep respect for her. The member opposite raises important points about how we all have to stand strong against anti-Semitism in this province. We all need to. I hear the pain in her voice. I hear the pain in the Jewish community's voice. I hear the pain in the Muslim community's voice about the rise of hate that they're experiencing. And we need to remember that we are in this together as British Columbians. We're in this together to fight hate. I am committed every day, along with this government, to do everything we can to fight hate in this province and the rise of anti-Semitism. We went at length yesterday with the member opposite of the steps that we are taking already to root systemic discrimination out of our government systems. It's something that I am deeply committed to and will continue to do the work every day.
House Leader of the Third Party.
Mr. Speaker, there's very serious questions about leadership being asked here today, and I think that it's important that we continue to question this government's lack of leadership when it comes to climate action, specifically when it comes to the doublespeak around LNG and LNG proposals claiming net zero. This government likes to pretend. We know that by powering LNG with electricity, they're not going to create a better, safer world. But BC Hydro is already cutting corners when it comes to the transmission lines that are going to deliver the electricity to the promised LNG projects. According to confidential documents by government obtained by the Narwhal, BC Hydro plans to replace the necessary environmental assessment for the North Coast transmission line with a, quote, streamlined process. Tara Marsden, spokesperson for the Gitnya Hereditary Chief, said a streamlined process is quite scary, especially if it lacks transparency, takes shortcuts, and doesn't allow voices to be heard. My question is to the Ministry of Energy, Mines and Low Carbon Disinformation. What does the BC Hydro's alternative streamlined process entail, and will the public have access to the process and the complete findings?
Minister of Environment.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. First of all, I want to point out to the member, I thank the member for the question, the number of steps that our government has taken to address the question of emissions from LNG facilities, which includes a variety of measures that have been put in place through output-based pricing system, carbon taxes, through the Clean BC program for industry, and working actively on bringing forward the regulatory cap on emissions from the oil and gas sector, which we committed to as part of the new Energy Action Framework. The member is referring to an internal memo of BC Hydro in which they were considering whether to make application to the government for an exemption under the Environmental Assessment Act from an environmental assessment process. They have not made that application. If they make that application, there is a process to consider it before it finally comes for decision making. During that process, it will be transparent that they have made the application. The basis of the application will be made transparent should they make an application, which they have not done. And the public will have the opportunity to review that fully and to make comment.
House Leader, Third Party Supplemental.
Mr. Speaker, I remember, and maybe I can remind the Minister, of when the Minister and his colleague, the Minister of Energy and Mines, were climate champions and not LNG propagandists. You see, in my own territory, I've witnessed where the Minister has not done an environmental assessment and instead created a process that doesn't exist called an enhanced review process that doesn't have any meat or anything. There's no idea what that enhanced process looks like. So now we've got BC Hydro proposing a streamlined process. Pardon us for not having the confidence in this minister that we're going to follow the laws that actually exist in this province and require environmental assessments. BC Hydro worries that a delay from an environmental assessment will impact the ability to meet increased demand for electrification, and that increased demand is coming from the LNG projects that this government supports. BC Hydro hasn't been able to build an $8 billion dam for less than $20 billion in Site C. Now they want to trample the public, Indigenous rights, and the environment again, Mr. Speaker. The proposed transmission line will affect property owners, farmland, waterways, at-risk species, all impediments to this fossil fuel industry. What is it about premiers from Point Grey and their obsession with LNG, Mr. Speaker? To the Minister of Energy, will the minister succumb again to the pressure of the fossil fuel lobby or demand an environmental assessment as is the proper and lawful process in this province?
Minister.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. And it's unfortunate that when we're dealing with questions of addressing permitted projects as well as addressing the very serious climate targets and objectives this government has, that the member of the third party resorts to rhetoric that is both inflammatory and inaccurate. There is no proposal from BC Hydro to me, to the Environmental Assessment Office, or to our government for an exemption. Should that proposal come forward, it will be required to be considered under the Act. It will be considered transparently. We take environmental assessment seriously. When I receive applications such as the one the member referred to, which was to grant an environmental assessment when the project did not meet the tests laid out in the Act, it received full consideration, transparent consideration, and as part of that consideration, an enhanced major mines permitting process was put into place. The member may claim that nobody knows what it is, but that is simply not true. It was transparent, just as any application, should it come forward, will be considered with full opportunity for public input.
Thank you, Minister.
I will simply reiterate, Honourable Speaker, BC Hydro may discuss whatever they want in corporate meetings, and memos may be released from Freedom of Information. That does not mean an application is in our hands.
Leader of the fourth party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last month, Tim Thielman, the Conservative candidate for Victoria Beacon Hill, who is a lawyer, drafted a 26-page legal brief on anti-Semitism and anti-Jewish hate, which has occurred during recent demonstrations. Advance copies have been given to the Victoria Police Chief and to the NDP Attorney General. Thielman's memo documented the ongoing violations of criminal laws by Victoria's anti-Semitic extremists and the legal basis on which other blockades and hate speech have been successfully prosecuted. The letter from the MLA from Coquitlam Marville singles out the NDP Attorney General for failing to reach out to the Jewish community to understand their fear amid rising anti-Semitism in society. So the question is to the Attorney General, will you commit to appointing a special prosecutor to prosecute the crimes of anti-Jewish hate speech and the open incidents of hate occurring at anti-Semitic protests so that the Victoria Police can confidently lay charges?
Attorney General.
I want to thank the member for the question. Making sure that those people that commit hate crimes are held accountable is a very important part of the work that we're doing as a government. And there are steps that we are taking to make sure that happens. Recently, the BC Crown Prosecution Service updated their hate crime policy to specifically make sure that there's a reference to the willful promotion of anti-Semitism as one of the factors to consider when they press charges, because we take this very seriously. I recently wrote a letter to Minister Varani specifically about changes that I'm asking him to make that makes it clear that denial of the Holocaust is a hate crime and should be included in that. and to help us with the criminal code to make sure that we can enable law enforcement to go to courts and address hate crimes more effectively. We have been, I can't talk about specific cases in the House, but we have been pursuing hate crimes in this province and prosecutions, and we'll continue to do that work to make the system better. Thank you.
Leader of the Fourth Party Supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, the people in British Columbia are not anti-Semitic. They aren't Islamophobic, and they do not condone hate. They deserve, quite frankly, a Premier and a government that shares these values, and a Premier and a government that protects all Canadians in British Columbia. What we have seen in Victoria from a religious leader is spreading of hate, spreading of things like anybody who is not Muslim should be considered an enemy of Allah, and much worse. In private meeting, the police have indicated that they are very reluctant to bring forward any charges because they feel they are not supported. This is a pattern that we are seeing, unfortunately, in this province. It's a pattern that has been identified clearly in the caucus of this government. And it's a pattern, quite frankly, I think that the public certainly will be paying attention to come the election of this year. So once again, to the Attorney General, what steps can you take to make sure that the police feel that they will be supported in going after these hateful issues? What steps can you take to make sure that the Jewish community will feel safe and that this government will take these issues seriously and that we'll see this brought to an end?
All questions through the chair, members. Attorney General.
Yeah, I think every single member in this House can agree that we need to all stand together to combat the rise of anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and all forms of hate in this province. It's something that we as a government are committed to doing, that I am personally committed to doing every day on this job. And that includes a cross-government approach, whether it's working with our Solicitor General and his ministry related to making sure police have the resources and training that they need to step up with enforcing hate crimes, whether it's the work that I talked about just previously about making sure that we have the tools in our criminal justice system to go after that, the update of the BC prosecution hate crime policy. This is an all-of-government approach, and I want to send a message to every community member out there, every Jewish person in this province that feels scared, that feels the rise of anti-Semitism around them, that we are in your corner. We will do whatever it takes to get rid of hate in this province. They have my commitment, and they have the commitment of this government.
Members, please, it's a very serious issue. Let's not have a crosstalk. Member for Parksville-Qualicum.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 12,000 people in Oceanside are on a wait list for a family doctor. The lucky ones, they wait up to 3 years to get connected, but that list is growing longer and longer every day. It's a wait list made up primarily of seniors who have paid into the system their whole lives, and now that they need health care, they can't get it. I regularly meet with people who are trying to get cancer tests but can't because they don't have a doctor. Met with a woman recently who got a phone call from BC Cancer with her results. Said it's serious, but I can't share them with you because you don't have a family doctor. It took weeks for her to get those results to find out that she had breast cancer that had metastasized. And she had gone through this process more than 20 years before, and it's a direct comparison to the system we have today versus the system before. Working together with our local primary care network, the Division of Family Practice and Island Health, we have identified a location for a primary care centre in Parksville. We have put together a plan, we have a business plan, but Island Health was recently told by the ministry that there is no capital funding available for new primary care centres in our community. Now, I know the minister will point to the new physician master agreement, LFP, new spaces at SFU, or new medical school, new spaces, and 700 net new doctors. That's fantastic news. But when my division tours new docs in my community, and there is no team-based care for them to work in, these docs do not stay, and the system is getting much worse. My question, Mr. Speaker, is it true that the provincial budget that's projecting a nearly $8 billion deficit has no funding for primary care in the city of Parksville? And is the minister suggesting that residents in my community start bottle drives and bake sales if they want to get primary care?
As the member will know, last year, we, as a direct result of the work we've done with the doctors of BC, everywhere in BC, added net new 708 family doctors in BC. The place where there's the most family doctors is Vancouver Island, in Island Health on Vancouver Island. In fact, Honourable Speaker, the member will know that we saw an increase of 179 doctors on Vancouver Island alone. That's an increase in 9 months, of 24%. He'll also know that we've established in British Columbia primary care networks to support team-based care, Honourable Speaker, and that there are 1,700 FTEs, meaning full-time jobs in that area, doctors and nurse practitioners and health sciences professionals and healthcare workers, Honourable Speaker, to build out team-based care. There were none before. There are now 77 in place. There are 1,700 people working in that area. In addition to that, in terms of young doctors, Honourable Speaker, on Vancouver Island, in our new to practice contract, 63, Honourable Speaker. New to practice nurse practitioners, 68. It's by ensuring that there are more doctors in place and supporting those doctors with primary care networks that come from the community, including from Parksville-Qualicum, that we're addressing these issues that are critical to ensure family practice in British Columbia, Honourable Speaker, and I thank you very much for the question.
The bell ends the question period. Madam Clerk. Sorry, the petition by Richmond Steveston.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I rise today to present a petition on behalf of 334 of my constituents in opposition to the Tilbury LNG Marine Jetty project. Thank you.
Madam Clerk.
Orders of the day.
Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, in the main chamber, I call Committee of the Whole on Bill 2, Employment Standards Amendment Act. In Douglas, for a committee room, I call Committee of Supply for Ministry of Citizen Services. In the Birch Committee room, call Committee of Supply for Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure.
Committee chairs.
We'll call the committee to order. We are dealing with Bill 2, Employment Standards Amendment Act 2024. Shall Clause 1 pass? Recognizing the member from Shuswap.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair. With the pending changes to the legislation for the minimum wage rate in British Columbia, just through you, Honourable Chair, to the Minister, can the Minister share with this House what consultation has been undertaken in I guess, in contemplation in the submission of this new piece of legislation?
Recognizing the Minister of Labour.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Before I begin to answer the question, I'd like to introduce staff here that is here to support us. Trevor Hughes on my left, our Deputy Minister of Labour, and Jake Ayers, Assistant Director, Labour Policy and Legislation, and Lydia Zucconi, Senior Policy Advisor, Labour Policy and Legislation. Madam Speaker, through you to the member, there was extensive consultation that took place in order to establish the minimum wage in British Columbia. When we formed the government in 2017, soon thereafter we appointed Fair Wages Commission, 3-member panel, representative of the unions, business, and an independent chair. They went around the province and many emails and written submissions, and through their report, the learning was that showing us the pathway. That was one of the questions that we asked them, showing us the pathway by speaking to, consulting with business, unions, workers, small businesses, and experts and academics, and show us a pathway to at least $15 an hour. And that's what they did. So by 2021, through their recommendations, the minimum wage in British Columbia went to $15.20. And the members questioned who they consulted and what the consultation took place. I would say that during the course of their work regarding future BC's minimum wages, the Fair Wages Commission held extensive consultation, as I just said, with individuals, organizations, including trade unions, and then who they consulted. I think there are some information that I could share with, but it's also available on the Fair Wages Commission website or the report that was issued and made public. They received 109 research briefs or responses to the questionnaire, 53 emails against and 1,201 emails in favor of raising the minimum wage to $15. And so there's a number of areas that they went around. I could read them if the member wished to, but they went around the province. And the idea was to consult as widely as possible. And one thing that came clear through their report, if a member had the opportunity to read it, is that what they heard from businesses, especially small businesses, is the certainty that there should be a gradual, predictable increases, and so that the businesses can plan and manage their budgets going forward, what their labor cost is going to be. That's what they recommended, and after we reached the minimum wage to $15, and actually it was $15.20, they recommended that the future increases should be linked to some solid, what's the word I'm looking for, indicator such as CPI, so that everyone will know, the workers will know what their increase is going to be, that they are not going to be falling behind against the rise of inflation. And the businesses will also know, because in the beginning of every year, the published reports come from Stat Canada, what the average previous 12-month CPI was. And so they will know months before the next minimum wage would be implemented, which is June 1st. So it created certainty. It created, I think, assurance for the working people, the lowest paid worker in the province, that they are not falling behind.
Member.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair. I'm certainly familiar with the work of the Fair Wage Commission, but my question to you, Honourable Chair, to the Minister, what specific consultation was undertaken with respect to the piece of legislation that we're dealing with today? I don't believe, I certainly haven't seen that the Fair Wage Commission actually asked for this particular legislative change that's before us. And so, through Honourable Chair to the Minister, maybe when the Minister, in providing his remarks, can clearly just set out for British Columbians what the current process is in the province around the opportunity for government through an order in council to actually increase the minimum wage based on CPI index, and how the current process differs from the legislation before us. And then again, more specifically, what consultation has been undertaken directly related to the legislation that is before this House today?
Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. In the Fair Wages Commission, it was recommended that that we to establish a predictable indicators to guide future increases to the minimum wage, such as the CPI, or some other relationship, such as between the minimum wage and poverty level or average wage levels. This indicator should be used as a basis for change in conjunction with the consideration of other economic indicators. So that's what the recommendation was, and that's what we are following, because we are following the recommendation of the Fair Wages Commission. Their mandate was to show us a pathway how the minimum wage should be increased in this province. And they showed us how to get to $15.20. We reached there in 2021. And then, based on the recommendation, the direction given by the Fair Wages Commission, we've publicly been saying that the future increases to the minimum wage should be tied to the rate of inflation. And that's exactly what we did in the last 2 years, 2022, 2023. And this year, it will be the same. The difference is now we are putting it in law so that we take it away and out of the hands of the politicians to make political decisions around this, because businesses don't like it, workers don't like it. It creates an opportunity for the government to freeze minimum wage for a period of time, as we saw happen in early 2000, and then give large increases over a short period of time. That's not what businesses want, and that's not what Fair Business Commission heard and recommended based on what they heard. So that's what we've been saying, that we have committed to tie this to rate of inflation. We've been using that formula, and now going forward, it will be tied to the rate of inflation, and the increase will come automatic. It'll be the law, if it passes here in this House, of course.
Member.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. I appreciate the additional information from the Minister. However, as I asked and posed in my last question, I certainly do not believe that it was the Fair Wage Commission that actually asked for this specific legislative change that's before us. So again, if I can ask through the Honourable Chair to the Minister, what specific consultation was undertaken with respect to the legislation that the Ministers brought forward before this House?
Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Not only the government, Madam Speaker, the business community. I have a report here from BC Chamber of Commerce, 2023-2024 Policies and Positions Manual. What are they saying? On the minimum wage, there's a minimum wage should be tied to CPI. They went on to say, we want the government to ensure that the minimum wage continues to only increase by CPI, with the government encouraging employer that can pay a living wage to do so. Then they went on to say that the provincial government, one, introduce legislation to index future minimum wage increases to the Consumer Price Index CPI, unless CPI decreases below zero, that incorporate the following parameter. Any minimum wage increases be tied to the CPI level indicated in the month before it is announced. Any minimum wage increases need to be announced with at least 6 months lead time before it goes into effect, like the province of Ontario. So I think we are following the Fair Wages Commission, as is the recommendation by the BC Chamber of Commerce. They are suggesting go with what the Fair Wages Commission recommended. Then they went on to say we should bring legislation, and they mentioned, and I clarified that in the House, that if the inflation go below zero, it will not reduce the minimum wage, and it'll remain the same in that year. So I think we're guided by businesses, and the Fair Wages Commission heard through their consultation the similar, and that's what they suggested, and that's why we're going forward.
Member.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair. Look, the Fair Wage Commission, and I believe this is what the Minister had just shared, is that the Fair Wage Commission established that the CPI rate of change would be used as a basis for any future wage rates. It did not indicate or direct that it shall be specifically exactly as CPI. Through your Honourable Chair to the Minister, government currently has flexibility within its mandate. It was not that the Fair Wage Commission asked specifically for this piece of legislation. My question again, through your Honourable Chair to the Minister, what consultation has been undertaken with British Columbians and the wide and broad business community with respect to the legislation that is before the House today? Has any direct consultation or outreach been undertaken? The Minister certainly has referenced a letter or a position policy that was presented by the BC Chamber, but they are only one of many business organizations across BC. They certainly do not speak for all. And so through you, Honourable Chair, to the Minister, can the Minister share with this House what level of engagement and consultation has been undertaken with the larger, broader business community and other British Columbians in establishing this legislation that's before the House?
Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Honourable Chair, it's been a public commitment made by this government that we will not allow the lowest paid workers in this province fall further and further and further behind the cost of inflation, as was the case a number of years ago, which caused British Columbia to become one of the lowest minimum wage in the country. And through the recommendations of Fair Wages Commission, who through consultation, listening to the businesses, listening to the workers, academics, gave us a pathway, show us a pathway to go to $15.20 an hour over 4 years. And then they said, tie it to something similar to CPI, some predictable indicator. And they mentioned CPI. And we committed, after the report was made public, that that's where we will go. And not only we committed, we followed through with action. Like last 2 years, minimum wage was increased by the rate of inflation of the previous year. That's what we've been saying, that's what we've been hearing, and businesses, the workers, everyone knew that that's the direction we are going. Now, member could say, well, we as a government could continue on an ad hoc basis through the cabinet decisions to increase by the rate of inflation. But then Madam Speaker, then you are subjected to the political pressures of the day. The governments react to political pressures. As it happens, it's not just a theory, it happens all the time. And again, 2001 to 2010, the minimum wage in British Columbia was frozen. Almost 10 years, the lowest paid workers in this province went without any increase. And I think Fair Wages Commission recommended that. The Chamber of BC Chamber of Commerce agree with that notion going forward. There's a good science behind it, in my view, and that's why they're all agreeing to it. And it just takes the uncertainty out of the system. And now everyone will know. And we're not the only one. Other provinces, there are about 7, 8 jurisdictions, they have tied their increase to minimum wage to the CPI in some form or shape. And here, that's exactly what we are doing, tying the minimum wage increases to the rate of inflation. Businesses will know, workers will know early January or mid-January when the Stat Canada numbers come out, that come June 1st, what the increase is going to be so that they have time to adjust. The businesses can have time to adjust for their budgets going forward, plan their businesses accordingly, and the workers will know that they will be rising with the rate of inflation as far as the wages are concerned. And I want to say why minimum wage is important, Madam Speaker, so the workers can stay in line with the rate of inflation. These are the workers who are our neighbors, our friends, and provide so much of our essential services out there for us. And then, Madam Speaker, every cent they received in increase in minimum wage, every dollar, every cent, chances are almost all of it will be invested in their own communities, in their own businesses, in their neighborhood. So it does support the local businesses. At the same time, the lowest paid workers are also kept with the rate of inflation. These are not the folks that could be in a position where they receive their increase and go spend it in Hawaii or out of the country someplace on vacations. And these are the workers who will be spending every increase in their local businesses. So I think businesses will support, will help. That's why Chamber of Commerce is recommending let's put some predictability and certainty into this so that we take it out of the hands of politicians every year, not knowing, is it going to be CPI? Is it going to be CPI plus? Is it going to be CPI minus? And Madam Speaker, that's the uncertainty we're trying to take out of this.
Member.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Look, what I'm trying to attain from the Minister is what consultation has been undertaken with respect to the legislation that is before us. The Minister has just referenced it, and it seems apparent that maybe this piece of legislation is to avoid political pressures. I know that there are different organizations, Living Wages for Families BC, that continue to trumpet that the minimum wage gap in BC between a living wage and the minimum wage is $8 an hour. By effecting this change, government is largely losing the tool, the ability for government to respond with an increase that may be higher than CPI or lower than CPI. And it's interesting that the Minister has referenced not once but twice that political pressure and the potential avoidance of political pressure on decisions around the minimum wage rate. Now, I appreciate the Minister's referenced a policy position that was put forward by the BC Chamber. He's referenced that a number of times. I do hope that the Minister would agree that the BC Chamber is not the only voice for those representing business interests in BC, And there's also other organizations like the Living Wage BC folks that also have a very different view, feeling that the current minimum wage, even at the rate that it is now, tying that to CPI, is still inadequate. So through your Honourable Chair, this is a very important piece of legislation where government is largely going to lose the flexibility of adjusting the CPI based on a whole range and suite of other societal pressures that are happening. And so through your Honourable Chair to the Minister, can the Minister share with specificity what consultation has been undertaken with any business organizations or with any larger groups around the province with respect to the legislation that's before the House today?
Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. The consultation was conducted with Fair Wages through Fair Wages Commission. And this is what they heard. This is what they recommended. Now, government make decisions all the time. And one business organization, I admit, one recommended we should, bring a legislation. Of course, government is about choices, no doubt. You hear from different organizations who will tell you that the minimum wage is too low, even today. I hear that. But then you will hear from others, it is too high. And that's where government comes in, and that's why we did not, as the decisions were made previously by previous government, we actually sent Fair Wages Commission around the province, who consulted widely businesses, small businesses, all of their I think a lot of their organizations, and the associations that the member mentioned from the worker side, who were advocating higher minimum wage. And there is a call for living wage on many quarters out there. And I think you need to look at the balance. And that's what we are doing. The balance based on consultation that Fair Wages Commission took. And it, to us, makes sense. And that's what why we committed when the report was made public, that we will tie future increases to the rate of inflation. And we did last year and the year before. And this year, again, it's going to happen, provided this bill is passed here. And I think it's the right thing to do. It provides certainty, predictability. That's what businesses want, and that's what workers need, and that's why this decision is made.
Member.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair. Look at, the Minister has referenced the work of the Fair Wage Commission. It was undertaken in 2018, 5 years ago, pre-pandemic, during a time in an era where 10 years prior to 2018, the rate of inflation, or CPI, was minimal, 1.5%, 2.5%. But as we saw during COVID and post-COVID, significant inflation rates that had a significant impact on businesses and on individuals living in British Columbia. Through your Honourable Chair to the Minister, if the Minister is somehow trying to state the case that there is no consultation required today in 2024, and solely relying on a report that was commissioned 5 years ago, prior to any significant increases in the inflation rate in Canada, and relying solely on a position policy that was presented by the BC Chamber that only speaks for a small segment of businesses around the province as far as the number of employees. I think that, again, through your Honourable Chair to the Minister, can the Minister share with this House any consultation that has been undertaken in the last 4 or 6 months, specifically in relation to the legislation that is before the House today?
Minister.
Honourable Chair. Fair Wages report came out in 2018. but it shows us a pathway for the future 4 years. And it took us to 2021. These are very smart people. They knew the inflation goes up and down every year. And they recommended that the future after 2021, which 2-3 years ago, the increases should be tied to something like CPI. So it's not 5 years ago. Their recommendation was to affect 2021. And we did that. That's not just, it was just report and it was ignored. We did that. 2022 increase was according to rate of inflation the previous year. 2023 was the same. And this year will be the same. By the way, also, we as government, based on the recommendations by the Fair Wages Commission, made it election platform and promise during 2022 provincial general election. That was our campaign commitment as well. It was widely debated that we would make minimum wage increases to tie with the rate of inflation. So the commitment was there, guided by the Fair Wages Commission, and at least there's a one business association, which is pretty large, representing a lot of members, recommended we go that route. And Madam Speaker, I think we have debated this to quite at length, and I'm prepared to continue to ask along this way, but that's the consultation guided by consultation and our public commitment and our 2020 election promise. That's why we are going the direction we're going.
Member.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Well, it's disappointing that government has not undertaken any direct consultation with respect to the legislation that is before the House today. A report that was commissioned and reported out in 2018 in a period when inflation rates were in the 1 and 2% range, far different than what we have actually experienced here in BC and in Canada. Only just this last year, BC had an inflation rate that was far higher than the rest of Canada. And so it is disappointing that on a piece of legislation that will largely, as the minister has indicated, provide an opportunity for government to avoid political pressure, which will tie the rate of increase for the minimum wage specifically to only CPI, without the opportunity to take other considerations into effect. Maybe I can also ask Your Honourable Chair to the Minister, was there any engagement at all with First Nations communities with respect to limiting the future increase of the minimum wage rate in British Columbia to nothing higher or lower than the CPI?
Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Madam Chair, I think I see the notion behind questioning here somehow that if the inflation rate is higher to a certain level, somehow that the lowest paid worker should not receive the wage increase based on that rate of inflation. That's not acceptable. We should not leave the lowest paid workers to fend themselves. Of course, businesses suffer when the rate of inflation is high. There are other ways to support businesses, but should not be at the expense of the lowest paid workers in this province. Society is always judged by how we treat our most vulnerable and the weak. We cannot leave them behind. And you know who these workers are, Madam Speaker? About 62% of them are women. And most of them, I would say, many of them, are new to the country. They're trying to establish themselves here. This is their first experience for this new country. And they will be helping us build our economy going forward. We cannot just ignore them. So I think this is a fair approach, guided by the consultation by Fair Wages Commission. Again, listening to many businesses, when I said BC Chamber of Commerce, they are made up of 100 chambers of commerce in British Columbia, 100. And over 36,000 businesses are members. So there's a large, I think, a voice on behalf of the many business members of our society. And the question that member asked about the First Nation consultation, yes, in August 2023, Ministry reached out to the First Nation Leadership Council as well as the Métis Nations, BC, and Alliance of BC Modern Treaty Nations to advise them of the legislation under consideration and invite any feedback or input. To date, no input has been received.
Member.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair. Look, I think the Minister is maybe mischaracterizing my inquiry. The question that I'm raising is that government, by moving forward with this legislation, will lose the flexibility of either increasing the minimum wage rate at a rate that's higher than CPI or lower. So it's not that my line of inquiry is specifically about the concern that the rate of CPI is too high and that should not be provided or afforded to minimum wage workers in the province. To the contrary, the Minister, through the work of the Fair Wage Commission, there were significant increases over a 5-year period where the minimum wage rate was increased at a rate higher than the CPI index. But let me, it appears in the absence of any direct consultation with the business community or broader British Columbians, can the Minister share with this House how many individuals in the province of BC are currently earning or paid the minimum wage?
Minister.
Madam Speaker, there are about 131,000 workers earning a minimum wage in British Columbia in 2023.
Member.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair. 131,000 workers. And is the Minister able to share how many of those workers that are currently being paid the minimum wage earn additional stipend, whether that be in the form of tips or commissions over and above the minimum wage?
Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Member should know, I gave the numbers, how many are in British Columbia earning minimum wage in British Columbia. Tips are not part of the wages. Tips are on top of it, and they should not be considered in wages. I know member may be part of that government at one time. I think he was, could be wrong, that the liquor servers, for example, were paid less than minimum wage because the argument was, well, they are paid tips. And Madam Speaker, that's not the way we should be treating those workers. 82% of them were women. So I call it, and others call it, a discriminatory treatment of those workers. So tips are protected on top of their wages. And the wages are the one that we are talking about here. The minimum wage tied to the rate of inflation, it will be $17.40 come June 1st, a general minimum wage increase based on the rate of inflation of 2023.
Member.
Thank you, Honourable Chair, and I appreciate the response from the Minister. Look, we are talking about the lowest paid workers in the province, and I think that when British Columbians look to the minimum wage rate, they are also giving consideration to additional tips or commissions that are made on top of that. Look, I've got 4 amazing daughters. When they were going through college and university, they all worked in the services sector. Many of them, my girls, would come home and their tips were far in excess of their wages. I spoke to a server the other night here in Victoria that's making $100,000 a year between her minimum wage and her tips. I don't think that British Columbians are looking necessarily at the minimum wage reflective just of an individual that's potentially making $100,000 a year. So I think it's an important distinction. And so through your Honourable Chair to the Minister, can the Minister share with this House of the 131,000 minimum wage earners in the province of BC, what percentage of those minimum wage workers also earn, in addition to that minimum wage, some other form of stipend, be that a tip or a commission, in addition to that base minimum wage rate?
Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Because tips are not written in the law, it's voluntary. So no one will know whether someone is getting a tip or not. And only the worker will know, and those who gave tips will know. And it's hard to keep track of that, how many of them. It could be all of them, could be some of them, could be, some percentage of them. And because there's no record of knowing a worker went to, same workplace today that they will get tipped today, as they did yesterday. It's not guaranteed. So, Madam Speaker, it's hard to tell the numbers, but this is what we have: is 131,000 workers are paid minimum wage in this the province, and if they get tips, which is helpful, and that's the way the system is right now. So, Madam Speaker, noting the hour, I move that the committee rise, report progress, and ask leave to sit again.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Motion is carried. This committee stands adjourned.
Committee Chair.
The Committee on Bill 2 reports progress and asks leave to sit again.
When shall the committee sit again, Government House Leader?
Next sitting, Honourable Speaker.
So ordered. Committee Chair.
Honourable Speaker, Committee of Supply Section A reports progress on estimates over Ministry of Citizens Services and asks leave to sit again.
When shall the committee sit again, Government House Leader?
Next sitting, Honourable Speaker.
So ordered. Government House Leader. Oh, another committee, of course. Committee Chair.
Honourable Speaker, Committee of Supply Section C reports progress on the estimates of the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure and asks leave to sit again.
When shall the committee sit again?
Next sitting, Honourable Speaker.
So ordered. Government House Leader.
Move the House now adjourned.
Member, you heard the question. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. This House stands adjourned until 1 p.m. today.